This is a reading of The River Between Us by Richard Peck, Chapter 5. It took the morning for Delphine and Kalinda to unpack. Mama and Cass and I heard the thump and scrape of their trunks from above and the mumble of their voices. Scents this house had never known drifted down to us, the sweet grass of their baskets, the lavender of sachets. Who knew what came tumbling out of those treasure chests? I wouldn't have minded a look, but it was none of my business. So it was well past midday before Delphine and me started down the hill. Mama had turned me loose, and Kalinda had said, "Me, I stay home," the first time I ever heard her voice. Best of all, I wore a bonnet of Delphine's, a store bonnet, when she saw I didn't own one. Hers was crowned with a spray of silk roses like the ones in the pattern of her dress. My bonnet was so deep, so I saw the world at the end of a tunnel. I hoped to be noticed in it. As quick as we were in Roger's store, we were watched like hawks. Both the Rogerses and Peglegs Nelson and all their other help and a couple of country women turned over the goods. Word of our visitors had reached well beyond Grand Tower now. Delphine made short work of the store. I feared that very little in it would interest her, and very little did. She breezed by the pile of Mackinaw blankets. She barely browsed the dressmaker's counter with its needles and pins, the ferreting for binding, the tin suspender buttons, and the dozen bolts of calico at 7 cents a yard. She turned up her pert nose at the maple sugar in lumps and swept past the home remedies, the liniments, and the laudanum and borax, and all the salves and sulfurs. We were shortly back out on the porch. As Delphine could see, we'd pretty well done the town. Across the road was the only brick building, the office to lure Dr. Hutchins to come and doctor us. I, for one, wanted to give that place a wide berth. They said his floors were painted red to hide the blood. Delphine nodded past this landmark to the freight landing. T.W. Jenkins ran a hardware and ship repair establishment beside it, along with a lumber yard and a smithy. "It is where your brother works, no?" Delphine said. "We go there." I explained to her that women folk didn't go into Jenkins's as a rule. The forge was in a back room, and the men were apt to hang around there, chewing and using language we all knew but weren't supposed to, said Delphine, and lifted her skirts across the road. On the porch of the Jenkins's store, Mr. Clarence Worthen and Old Man Dutchy Bronkhurst were going at it, hammer and tongues. The Worthens' ancestry was Kentuckian, and they still called themselves Southern. Old Man Bronkhorst was straight from the old country and staunch for the Union and Lincoln. Each had a finger in each other's face. We sidled past them and inside. It was far better than the Rogerses, but here were cattle yokes and boat pins, oakum and caulking chisels and black iron pots. Hanging from rafters were rat traps and briar scathes and I don't know what all. I could see Noah in the yard behind, measuring off planking. I expected Delphine to turn her heel. She rapped the counter for service. As luck would have it, Curry Marshall answered the call. I looked away to give him the side view of my bonnet. Then I looked square at him. Searching the contents of the bonnet, he found my face. "Hey, Tilly," he said. I replied in kind, but I couldn't command much attention this near Delphine. She had a powerful effect on the male sex. "Have you, how you say it, les allumets?" She spoke in a throaty voice. What she was doing with her eyes, I couldn't see. Curry swallowed hard. "Zoom what's?" he said in a fading tone. To make fire, Delphine gestured. Matches? Curry said. We do, but they's high. Delphine overlooked that. And lamps, coal oil lamps? They's higher than a cat's back. We want an arm and a leg for them. Curry hooked his thumbs into his shop apron. Delphine overlooked that too. Evidently, in New Orleans, the merchant didn't warn you that their goods might be higher than you could pay. Send 6 or 8 to the house of Madame Pruitt, Delphine said, and the oil and the wicks and the chimneys. Plenty of oil and a box of matches. Curry and I both gaped. I was all bonnet and jaw. Nobody but the doctor burnt oil. Curry recovered. I'll box it up and bring it to the house after work. Do not let darkness fall, warned Delphine. There was some afternoon left. Now we climb your hill, Delphine said, to regard the view. I told her it was liable to be muddy underfoot and spoil her petticoats, but that naturally didn't matter to her. We climbed the backbone past our house. Delphine showed a good deal of ankle, hitching her skirts over root and rock. How steep your country is, she began to puff. All her shoals were askew. When we came at last to the Devil's Footstool, I saw Cass wasn't there. As a rule, she'd escaped from the house by this time of day. Delphine settled beside me on the footstool, and her skirts fell easy about her. How I admired her grace and wondered how to have it. The river flowed empty below, high with the spring floods from the snow melt above us. Delphine nodded north. Between the Devil's Backbone and the Oven Rock was a straggling graveyard. Your papa, she said, is he there? Oh no, Pa's not dead. Not that we knew of. She thought Ma was a widow woman. Pa's a riverman. Summers he worked the logging camps up in Minnesota country. Winters he's down south going shares on a Senate. A lot of the men folk do that. They're here in the spring to put the crops and back in the fall for the harvest. Of course, we haven't got any land, so there's no crops to put in. Oh, I babble like a brook and flowed like a freshet. At least I didn't tell her about how many seasons had passed since we'd seen hide or hair of Pa. Years, really. She seemed to hear more than I told. I was provoked at myself. Hadn't Mama just warned me to watch every word I spoke? Hadn't she made that crystal clear? So I made so bold as to ask Delphine if Delphine had a pa. Papa? Mas, oui, he's a Monsieur Jules Duval. No doubt Mayor Duval by now. Gird for war. I bring Papa's portrait in a gilt frame, she said. I am never without it. You will see where it hangs over my bed. He's apt to be hanging by the neck from a sour apple tree when us Yankees take New Orleans over, I thought, but I didn't say it. On Delphine flowed. Papa is of an ancient French family, you know. The Duvals are there on their land long before Americans come, long before. It took her no time to make me see the vast sweep of Duval cotton fields stretching for miles back from the river. She raised before my very eyes the columns that held up their deep porches, white as marble in the dazzling day. I saw the great houses of the Duvals standing in gardens hung with Spanish moss. He lived, Papa, mostly in the country, a gentleman, you know, but he come to New Orleans for the opera and of course for the balls. Ah, mon chéri, she said, imagine to maman and papa in the brilliance of the ballroom, leading a quadrille, always the first on the floor. She sketched this romantic couple in the Illinois air, every eye upon Maman and Grand Toilette and Papa golden hair, and all in midnight black. You have not lived until her voice sighed in silence so I could see them for myself. Then, when I had, she turned full on me. Her eyes had darkened with the day, they glistened. What did I know of homesickness, who had never been away from home? She spoke low. You would destroy all that, all I come from and know. I didn't want to fight the war with her. For one thing, I thought I might lose. I pulled away from her eyes and looked around for something else to say. Cass is usually up here by now. I tried to think how to explain Cass. She is droll, that one, Delphine said. She sees things that ain't there. She has visions? Delphine was interested at once. She is a seeress? I don't know about that, I said. Mama's worried to death Cass will lose her mind. But it is a gift she has, Delphine explained. Not in these parts, I said, wondering what I'd blurt out next. The rivers flow calmer at the end of the day for some reason. By and by, we began to feel the evening chill. Delphine and I climbed down the backbone to the house. On the porch stood a crate with the lamps and the oil. Eh, the lamp boy made his escape, Delphine rolled her eyes. He skedaddled before you find him. I was flushed in the cheek and neck and silent for once. You are sweet on the lamp boy, isn't it so? Delphine peered into my bonnet for the truth. So it looked like she knew everything anyway without you had to tell her. But I was forgotten in the next moment. As quick as we were in the door of the house, another scent I'd never smelled wafted our way. Delphine breathed deep and fell back, clutching her shawls. Jambalaya, she shrieked. Merci, bon Dieu, we are saved. How well I recall Delphine and me coming in from that damp evening, pulling off her bonnets. Kalinda, tree-top tall, had her face to the fire and her skirts pinned up under her apron, an apron of Mama's. She was browning onions in the biggest skillet. Nearly stuck to her side was Cass, measuring paste out of a jar. The kitchen was rank with provisions Kalinda and Delphine must have brought with them. A sack of rice, another of red beans, a wreath of onions, a coil of sausage, a mess of little bird's eye peppers. It was Kalinda's fireside now, and I was astonished to see Ma settling at the kitchen table. She wasn't idle. She didn't know how to be idle. But daylight had never caught her settling down. She was into a sack of pecans. We'd gathered out in the timber last night. In a litter of shells, she was picking out nut meats. She glanced up, a little ashamed about her ease. I seemed to see her for the first time how she twisted and her knobby hands were. Winter got to her joints, and she had pain she'd never spoke of. Looked to me like she'd surrendered her kitchen without a skirmish. And didn't we eat that last night? Always before pig's cheek in the pot liquor was a banquet to us when we could get it. Now we ate our first jambalaya, thick with tomato paste and the sausage, and the slab of salt ham we had, and alive with the onions all poured over the snowy rice. Real abolitionists wouldn't eat rice or cane sugar or anything the South produced. We dug right in. My insides didn't know which way to turn. Noah ate his fill too, twice, but he'd missed his mouth for stealing glances at Delphine. We saw now what good appetite she enjoyed. She was always to be a hearty eater. Although she couldn't boil water herself, she has starved to death in a well-stocked larder. Kalinda was back and forth from the table to the fire, but she ate her share. Life stirred in her dark eyes. How beautiful her hands were, dishing up, feeding us. Cass was right there beside her, watching Kalinda's hands, hearing her silences. Night never came. Night never come. We had the new coal oil lamps, you see. Once they were filled and we struck the matches and saw how the wicks worked, the kitchen sprang to life just as the hearth fire began to die. We covered our mouths at the sight of one another, Mom and Cass and me. Somehow it was brighter than day, and we were players on the showboat stage. Light found all the corners. The crockery glared from the shelf. I looked at Noah and caught my breath. I swear I hadn't noticed before how handsome he was. We were twins. How come he got the looks? He was dazed by the light, or Delphine. She summoned up her sewing from an elegant basket with seed pearls and tiny shells patterned on the lid. In her hands was a pair of ladies' underdrawers to be mended, though I didn't think no one needed to be seeing them. She leaned into the lamplight as if it was nothing to her, and the silver thimble on her finger glimmered like a star. Kalinda brought forth a pack of playing cards and laid them out on the table in the circle of light. Mama didn't hold with cards in the house. But she said nothing because Cass was transfixed, watching each card Kalinda snap down. Whether they were playing those cards or reading them, I couldn't tell. But much passed between them, and Mama was relieved to see Cass so bright eyed. How at home our visitors were, these light bringers. How settled they seemed to be, not like birds of passage at all.